My piece is entitled Instructions, Assignments, Prompts, and Propositions, Tools to Extend Presence and Create Influential Events. On Friday, March 13th of this year, all public schools in Utah closed to slow the spread of the COVID-19 virus. On the following Monday, I received word from my district that I would be given 2 days to make the necessary plans to shift to remote methods of instruction for a 2-week period, with the potential of extending to the end of the year. I worried the shift to remote instruction and not being in physical proximity would negatively alter the learning experience of my students and my role and practices as a teacher. In response to these concerns, I adapted my teaching to embrace social art practices that engage participants in conversations and lived experiences without the need for physical proximity. In A Conception of Teaching, Nathaniel Gage addresses the point that formal education is usually limited to the interactions and learning that occur when students are in the presence of a teacher. Gage clarifies presence to mean face-to-face interactions. However, Gage notes teaching can also occur when a teacher creates influential events in which he or she does not participate. I felt the success or failure of shifting to remote teaching would center on my ability to create influential events for my students and to extend my presence beyond physical proximity. I began by brainstorming how to adapt my teaching to fit within remote methods. I realized trying to recreate a more traditional classroom art experience would prove difficult because there was no way for me to know what kind of materials students had access to at home. And even more challenging was navigating the issue of student access to technology and internet. This led me to consider the art projects Learning to Love You More by Harold Fletcher and Miranda July, Sol LeWitt's wall drawing series, Yoko Ono's book, Grapefruit, a book of instructions and drawings, and the Walking Labs propositional walking project. I was intrigued by the way these artists use their art practices as a catalyst for social interaction, learning, and art making via long distance, in both virtual and non-virtual ways. The unique and successful aspect of Learning to Love You More was the way Harold Fletcher and Miranda July embraced the internet as an artistic medium to create an online-based art project. The project's website became an activation point or conduit to get people to do things they normally wouldn't do by completing assignments that Fletcher and July regularly posted. The assignments were things like take a picture of your parents kissing, recreate the moment after a crime, or draw a scene from a movie that made you cry. Along with the assignments, participants were invited to post their responses online to be viewed by others. By sharing, people all over the world connected and learned from each other. Sol LeWitt similarly created sets of instructions for others to follow in order to create the drawings in his wall drawing series. LeWitt thought of himself as a conductor who used his instructions to direct the drawing process without being physically present. Although there was an element of control, LeWitt's conceptual process allowed and embraced the distortions, disruptions, and errors that naturally occurred because, as LeWitt said, each person draws a line differently and each person understands the world differently. Yoko Ono's book, Grapefruit, a book of instructions and drawings, contains prompts for action. Ono said, poetry is nouns or adjectives. This is verbs, and you have to do them. These are all instructions, and when you just do it, then you start to understand. Ono provides readers with prompts or suggestions for action, and through those words, interacts with readers in sharing things she believes worth considering. Finally, the Walking Labs propositional walking project consisted of 20 different propositions from artists and scholars exploring walking as an artistic medium. Sarah Truman, curator of the project, wrote, propositions differ from instructions. They are prompts at could be. In this context, the propositions are a starting point or a suggestion to begin an inquiry, and the individual is able to adapt and create their own experience. With these social art practices in mind, I curated a selection of prompts, assignments, propositions, and instructions designed to engage students in the experience of being quarantined at home. Some of the assignments included things like climb to the highest point in your yard or house while being safe and document what you see. Take a photo out of your window Try taking a photo with the blinds or curtains shut. Try at different times of the day. Build a fort big enough for your family to all fit in, or make a fort for you to escape from your family. Make a video of someone dancing. Create a field book for your backyard. Create a coronavirus survival guide. Each assignment was able to be completed at home using items students had on hand. Students selected 2 assignments per week and submitted corresponding documentation via our online class website or through email. I'm going to share my screen and show a slideshow as I finish reading. I was immediately mesmerized by the results. The documentation, mostly in the form of photographs, was authentic and rich with meaning. The responses felt fresh to me in comparison to the art that is normally made in middle school, which often feels cliché or fabricated. The student responses were different. It seemed that students were engaged in living, documenting their experiences and enjoying it. I was particularly impressed by one student who created a stop-motion animation using Legos, which detailed all the ways her life had changed because of COVID-19. Another student impressed me by creating and photographing elaborate scenes of things he wished he could do, that he wished he could be doing instead of being stuck at home. Each student response felt like a snapshot into their lives that was raw, real, intimate, and moving. As the school year progressed, students began to delve into assignments of their own creation, culminating in a series of artworks or propositions that represented the experience of being quarantined. Not all students produced amazing work. Some students invested minimal effort just to receive a grade, while others chose not to participate at all in the remote activities. Informally, I observed when students genuinely engaged with the remote prompt-based instruction, they seemed fully engaged and created art that was genuine and interesting. I was surprised that many of the students who traditionally struggled in on-site schooling excelled in this format. The beauty of the propositional or instruction-based curriculum was it allowed each student to respond, adapt, and interpret the assignments to the level of their readiness and capability. Etienne Wenger said, "A perspective is not a recipe. It does not tell you just what to do, rather it acts as a guide about what to pay attention to, what difficulties to expect, and how to approach problems." In a similar way, the prompts were not meant to impose my beliefs on students or to control outcomes, but rather to give students a starting point or a guide. Although the prompts were the same, the interpretation and responses varied with each student. At times, the responses illustrated the aspects of life we have in common with each other, and at other times, students' unique perspectives were highlighted. It reminded me of the conversation Pablo Higuera had with an educator at the Reggio Emilia School in Italy. The educator told Higuera, "To participate is not to create homogeneity. To participate is to generate vitality." In Merriam-Webster's dictionary, vitality is defined as the capacity to live and develop. As my students and I interacted remotely and engaged in art making that investigated our real-life experience of being quarantined, we embodied the definition of vitality and built a community of learning together. Initially, I thought the pandemic quarantine was disruptive and the subsequent educational situations would be subpar to in-person interactions. Instead, I discovered that shifting the focus of our learning to real-life spaces, adapting a curriculum that allowed students to respond in their own way, and using a remote platform of interaction created a community space to share and learn together. Etienne Wenger poses the question, what if we adopted a different perspective, one that placed learning in the context of our lived experience of participation in the world? In my experience, students shifted from being just students to being real participants, engaged in a conversation that led to meaningful art, and a community being built, regardless of physical proximity to each other. Thank you.